about these men and who was the actual trigger man.
Okay. Orlando was one of the guys involved with the...
Allegedly
with the Tupac shooting. Keefe D, his name came up. Zip is dead. Zip died of a medical illness maybe 3 years ago. So he passed on. DeAndre Smith his name was out there, and then Terrence Brown. And these guys' names came up during the investigation with Tupac and with Biggie. They were like cross-referenced in both cases. Because the case involving Tupac, if you want to look at it from one point of view, it was West Coast related. Right, it was West Coast sort of related because the perpetrators of Tupac's death were all from the West Coast pretty much. Okay? The Biggie Smalls murder, the assailants are from the West Coast. So both murders have the components of the individuals that were involved or allegedly to be involved or all West Coast people. Pretty much. Okay? Zip was the guy he was a New York guy who was a very well known here in New York, and he had a lot of ties to a lot of people out in LA because he used to travel there all the time. Zip was all over the place. And Zip was like the common component between the East Coast and the West Coast at that time because he had knew a lot of people. I had even arrested Zip one time. Wow. But Zip held strong. He wouldn't tell me who was involved with the murders. He didn't want to snitch. I mean, I respected him for it because he didn't want to say what happened and he didn't want to divulge any information. And that's what the street does. Like, you get a street guy like that, sometimes they don't want to tell. They don't want to say anything about anything. But,
even if you cut him as we do.
Right. But he left going to his grave knowing what he knew about what went on with those murders.
Wow.
So that's the sad part about it. And the shame of it is, in this whole big picture of this case, the big shame about it is that these guys were major artists in the rap world. And their music still lives on today. Right. And the shame of it is that no one's come forward yet to really do these cases. Now, there were a lot of other problems in the Tupac case. The Las Vegas PD didn't trust the LA PD, and especially the guys that were doing some Suge security because they were all retired or active LA police officers.
Right.
I'm not saying from LAPD. They might have been from Compton PD, or they might have been from, I believe, another agency. That was LA related. So the Las Vegas PD thought that there was too many leaks and they didn't trust them. And then LAPD had a lot of problems itself with its, members of the police department working with these rappers, doing moonlighting, like as security guards, and then being confidants, and then working in the business that they worked. So there were a lot of problems with that. The reason that these cases are not solved is because the Las Vegas PD was a little naive at the time to work with the LAPD about what went on. I understand their concerns, but they should have got with somebody that was knowledgeable with the LAPD and worked with this so they could solve the case, and they didn't. And that became a problem. That really became a problem with this case. And why these cases are not solved today, there's a twofold problem. The problem is with Las Vegas, and it's with the LAPD. I'm not saying the LAPD didn't try to solve it, but there were just too many obstacles in the way as far as corruption. The Ram Park Division, that was a big thing in Los Angeles with the cops that were doing a lot of work. So there's a lot of problems. There were a lot of problems back then. There were cops who were on death row.
But I don't get how a cop is allegedly a gang member, a Pyru, and a cop. How's that work? I mean,
in that particular case, the police department pretty much didn't have a lot of knowledge on the cops back then and what they were doing. Cops can't be blood members and be police department members. They can't be. How this happened, listen, it slipped through the cracks. It wasn't on anybody's radar at the time until something happened. But there was a lot of problems with those cops being involved with these guys because, see, we always talk about art imitates life. The rappers talk about, like if you look at Biggie's music, and he would talk about Frank White, I'm the Al Capone. He's talking about mafia members. And sometimes people get involved with this art, this life so much that they go out here and they think they're part of this crew. Even cops, it happens to cops. They get that kind of, I forget what it's called, the complex that they get, where they can't distinguish if they're a cop or they're a bad guy.
Right.
And these cops were making money. They were in the music business. So they thought they had all the juice in the world, all the power in the world. And it caused them to be corrupt, And that was a big problem with with the, you know, that was a big problem with the police department out in Los Angeles. You know, so that became a big deal, you know? And eventually, like I said, those cops were in jail. They might even be out by now. I don't know if they're still in. I don't know what their sentences is right now, but at the time, I know they were arrested back then. With Tupac's murder, Suge's got information on what happened because he was there that night. He was a victim as well as a guy who knew what led up to Tupac's death. So yes, he has information. When it comes to the Biggie Smalls murder, Suge Knight is definitely has information about that murder as well.
He allegedly set it up.
He's allegedly involved in that,
right.
From what's been told and what's been said and what's been found out. Suge has a lot to offer for both cases, you know? But like I said, this snitching thing in the street, you know, people don't want to snitch, they don't want to talk, but I think they got the wrong idea when they talk about it, about what a snitch is and what the person is that goes out and gives information and helps. Because you gotta remember, my definition of a snitch is when you go and rob a bank and you do it with a partner and you don't rat him out. That's not snitching. But if somebody gets killed and you're not talking about it, and especially the magnitude and the how big these guys were, it's amazing how nobody wants to solve these cases. They can be solved. I'm going to put it on the line. I'm going to tell you straight up, as you're talking to me, all these cases can be solved. Yes.